Hello, if you're new here, my name's Ed, I'm a junior doctor in the UK, and on this channel we break down the injuries and medical science of TV and film. Today we're going to take a look at Attack on Titan. For those of you who haven't heard about it or seen an episode before, it follows a bunch of citizens in a huge medieval city surrounded by a 50-meter wall, which may sound like somewhat of a prison until you realise the wall is protecting them from being eaten by the giants that live on the other side, called Titans. And having watched the first episode, it is absolutely brilliant, so thank you to everyone that recommended I check it out. Usually I would film my reaction, but I've had loads of copyright issues covering anime before, most notably when I did the Cells at Work series, so I'm going to do more of a breakdown. So here is some of the medical science from episode 1.
Yup, watching the old gate we are. Thirsty work playing sentry.
In one of the establishing scenes, we hear that the gate guards smell like a tavern, and the illustrators have also given them red cheeks, what we call alcohol flush reaction, which is much more common in people from East Asia, something like 50% or so will have this reaction. It is caused by the buildup of acetaldehyde, a toxic byproduct of alcohol breakdown. Now, our body uses an enzyme called aldehyde dehydrogenase to further break this down, but if we're deficient in this enzyme, which, as I said, more people are in East Asia, it ends up accumulating in the body and causing these flushing effects, as well as other effects such as making you feel sick and headaches.
Good Dr. Yeager. Yeah, well, can't argue with a man who single-handedly spared us from the plague.
We learn early on that one of the main characters, Wren, his dad is a doctor, good man, and that the guards say he single-handedly spared us from the plague. Quite the guy. The guard may be using the term plague as a general term for an infectious disease outbreak, or they may indeed be using it to specifically refer to plague, the infectious disease caused by the bacteria Yersinia pestis, the most infamous outbreak of this being the Black Death that killed between 75 and 200 million people in the 14th century, bearing in mind the population of the world was around 450 million people at the time. The bacteria spreads through droplets from close contacts, causing a pneumonia, so an infection of the air sacs of the lung, or via fleas that would bite you, causing you to get bubonic plague, so taking hold in your lymph system and causing very painful swellings, or also septicemia, so an infection in the blood. So both of these transmissions via droplets and via fleas would be accelerated by poor living standards. So just the fact that they had the plague here gives us a real insight into the public health issues of this medieval city. And it must also be some hyperbole by the guards to say the doctor single-handedly spared them from the plague, as although modern antibiotics and supportive care can treat the condition, the only way to stop a large outbreak would be to sort out all the sewage system and increase the living standards, which obviously one person on their own is not going to be able to do. In the opening scene, we met the scouts, what are kind of like the Marines that venture out of the city walls and take on the Titans. Who the hell signs up to that task? Because they inevitably get a bunch of injuries, because have you seen the size of the Titans? We see lots of head injuries, eye injuries, all typical things we'd see in trauma associated with an assault. And then tragically, we learn about Moses, a dude that's all that's left of him is his arm. So sounds like he's been munched by a Titan and suffered a traumatic amputation of his arm. Even if he did somehow survive, say he got spat out by the Titan without any medical support in the form of a tourniquet around his stump, he would bleed to death just from this injury. So either way, not a good end for poor old Moses. So far, we've seen a few of the smaller Titans, which the wall is doing a good job of keeping them out. But then we meet this dude, the Colossal Titan, and suddenly the protective wall, it don't seem so protective as he can just peer over it. And it's a really interesting design of these creatures. They're not just big humans. Sure, they are humanoids, so very similar in appearance to us, but they just couldn't be that close to us physiologically, so how we work, or anatomically, so how we are arranged, because we are built for our size and it just wouldn't scale up. Let's think of the anatomy. So the square cube law means that if we double the size of our body, the cross-sectional area of our bones would increase 4 times, but the volume of our body would increase 8 times. So although our absolute strength is increasing by the square, relatively our strength is going to struggle very quickly to match our weight, which is increasing by the cube. Meaning our bones, as we currently have them designed, would not be able to support our increasing body weight. Wren over on the Corridor Crew channel, a channel which I absolutely love, does a brilliant job breaking this down. I also learned from his video that one of the in-universe explanations for the preserved anatomy is that the Titans don't weigh as much as you think they would. So nice little touch there, and I'd recommend checking Wren's video out. Secondly, thinking about the physiology of the Titans, and we do see this in the anime, is their reaction times and the speed they move would be a lot less. And one of those reasons would be the nerve signals are going to take longer to travel to the brain, for the neurons in the brain to process the information, and for the nerve impulses to travel back. So let's take the Colossal Titan here. He is 25 times bigger than me. The nerve impulses are going to take roughly 25 times longer to travel if his nerves are built like mine. The impulses in our nervous system actually travel at different speeds depending on the nerve, and one of the things that affects that is the diameter of the nerve. So we would expect them to be larger in the Colossal Titan here, therefore you may expect the nerve impulses to travel quicker too. And the fastest nerve conduction velocity in the whole animal kingdom is only around twice as much as ours, around 200 meters a second, which weirdly is found in a shrimp. So a shrimp that I wouldn't recommend playing slapsies against. So even if he had the fastest nerves in the animal kingdom, we are still looking at reaction times of 10 times slower than me in the Colossal Titan, and that's not including delays at the nerve synapses or neuromuscular junctions or any kind of mechanics of getting the muscles moving, because don't forget, going back to the square cube law, the muscles are having to support and move many times more weight. But not all of the Titans are anywhere near as big as this chappy. So if we take a more average Titan size, say around 15 meters, then using our rough calculations, their reaction times would be around 3 to 7 times slower than us. And as I said, we do see this in the anime. So the scouts utilize their superior agility and reaction times to try and take on the Titans. Basically, the conclusion is that although they are humanoid, they must be very different to us under the hood to be able to exist like we see them in the anime. The other issue with being this big that I really want to mention is that we now know why they are attacking the city. It's because they're going to be really blooming hangry, especially if they're only eating humans. As to run all of this muscle and move at this speed, they will have a crazy high metabolic demand. So for example, a big elephant, you know, they're like 3 meters high and 6 meters long, would eat around 70,000 calories a day. This is very rough maths, but let's just go along with it. Let's just assume a 15-meter Titan would need somewhere in the region of 150 to 200,000 calories a day. Now, how many calories in a human? Weirdly enough, we never learnt this at med school, so I did some Googling, and lo and behold, someone on the internet has done the maths and calculated humans are around 125,000 calories when you digest them. So using all my very rough estimates would mean on average, on a purely human diet, a 15-meter Titan would need to eat well over a human, if not 2 humans a day, which makes the anime all the more terrifying. The Colossal Titan kicks off the whole story by damaging the city walls, and we get some nice shots of him, and he appears like a human that's lost all his skin and subcutaneous tissue, as we see a lot of his muscles on show. Clearly this is to make him seem even more terrifying, but you wouldn't survive very long if you didn't have your skin. Firstly, hypothermia and dehydration. It's going to be very difficult to maintain the consistent temperature and fluid status of your body without your skin. And secondly, you'd get an overwhelming infection and turn septic within a day or two. given the fact he's running around in the outside world like this, and lots of bacteria will be getting into his body, kicking the infective process off. So again, we'd have to assume they've evolved in a different way, have a different immune system, or this isn't the inside of their body like the muscles are with us, and there's a deeper protective layer that mimics our skin's job. Just breaking down these muscles on show. So from the cheek to the jaw, that's the masseter muscle, and you can feel that in yourself when you clench your teeth. He has some strange muscles in front of that, so there are no muscles in us that stop at the teeth. The closest in this area would be the buccinator muscle, so the side of the cheek, but as we know, these pass to the bottom of the jaw. So these white bits are pretty cool that we see here around his forehead, around his cheek, and over his mouth. So these would be representing aponeuroses. So these are sheets of tendons, and they have similar jobs to tendons in that they anchor the muscles and connect them to the bones. We do have a large one on the top of our head called the epicranial aponeurosis, but yeah, we have none of the other ones that I can see here on the Colossal Titan. Then onto this shot that you would be very familiar with if you've ever studied muscle groups. So this is near perfect anatomy of the back and posterior leg. So we see trapezius at the top here with the lats coming through beneath it. Then the large muscle of gluteus maximus, and then in the posterior thigh, the hamstring. So biceps femoris, and then opposite semimembranosus and semitendinosus.
Sweetie, listen to me. My legs have been crushed. Even if you could get me out of here, I can't run.
And the last thing to break down is we see the devastating impact of the Titans on the city, and an absolutely heart-wrenching scene of Eren saying goodbye to his mum, Carla, as she has a crush injury. The fact she's conscious and talking and alert is a very good sign, because what's going to kill her in the short term is hemorrhagic shock, so uncontrolled bleeding, and the danger of moving her is disrupting any direct pressure or disturbing any clots that may have formed that are stopping her from bleeding out. So at the scene, you would have to extract her very carefully, keep her immobilized as much as possible, get a pelvic binder on in case of pelvic fracture, because you can bleed a lot internally from that, and possibly splinting or a tourniquet around the legs if they're deformed or bleeding. And then an absolutely brutal end to the first episode. These Titans are so freaky looking, as Carla is killed by decapitation. Probably not going to surprise you that this isn't survivable, and is in fact one of the times where you wouldn't even attempt CPR, because, how would you? So there you have it, a little breakdown and my thoughts from the first episode. Actually really rather moving, had a lot of heart in it considering how out of this world the concept is. If you enjoyed it, please let me know, firstly, if there's any other episodes of this you want me to look at, and secondly, if there's any other animes or TV shows that you like that you'd like me to have a look at, and I'll see what I can do. And so it just leaves me to say thank you if you've made it this far into the video, and for all the continued support on the channel. I hope you're all well, and I'll be back soon. It seems to be a regular thing now. Whenever I start recording, Daisy comes in